And we're live. Hello and welcome to Media Studies. I'm James Brown. Thanks for joining me. I'm here with Sabby Reyes Kulkarni.
Hello, sir. I'm very happy to be with the king of all media studies, James Brown, living in America.
Ah. Sabby, let's start with you. Get your plugs out of the way. Feedback Def, what's hopping on it?
I just posted yesterday on feedbackdef.substack.com a piece titled something like 5 magic words for the next time someone tries to browbeat you into agreeing with them. And I'll just say here the 5 magic words are: I don't subscribe to that. It is my attempt at giving people verbal jujitsu in a time when language is so weaponized and when people are in everyday conversation. I'm not talking about canceling, but like just talking to people, they kind of give you that moral leverage to nudge you. You can reclaim your space back.
What's one
I
of these
also,
words?
what's that?
What's one of these words?
Well, it's I don't subscribe to that. Is the phrase?
Okay.
It's a 5-word
Oh,
sentence.
okay.
And or you could also say I don't see it that way, but I don't subscribe to that. My argument is that it re-establishes the airspace, because you and I have been in so many of these conversations. You've been in the workplace, you've seen this. um it just subtly puts it out there. There's a circle around me and what I think, and I'm choosing to, and you have no control over that. I'm choosing what's in that circle, and it puts the onus on the other person either to back down or to come forward as a more controlling tyrant. And I want people to try it. I want this to become standard. I want this to be out there in the standard lexicon.
Very interesting.
And see how it works for people. I also have an ambient music column debuting on Monday, a monthly column where I pick a bunch of ambient albums out that month that I think people should check out, and that's going to run on Pop Matters. And my playlist, I've made a playlist to go along with it, so that'll be on my Substack. I'll plug that on my Substack too.
Feedbackdef.substack.com. And
Yes,
you can
sir.
check out me at jamesbrowntv.substack.com. I do, about 2-minute audio pieces 5 days a week. And I'm working on a media studies column. I'm trying to figure out how this will work for me. Usually I have to either decide one thing and drill down on it, or maybe I'll hit on a couple different things, maybe come up with a big old 5 or a big old 3. I'll figure it out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I have been working on a universal declaration of the right not to be stoned in the town square. That's been in the works for, yeah, I came up with that in my head and it's a draft in Substack for like months now. Or a universal declaration of the right not to throw stones is actually what with all these rights.
Glass
Um,
houses.
yeah, yeah. Just itemizing them one by one, because we've got to reclaim the psychic space. Even though, you can listen to people like Ethan Strauss say the tide is turning, but I think you are a proponent of the idea that it's not turning all that much, and it might not even be turning, period. So either way, there's still this kind of narrative warfare we have to be involved in, and it's increasingly coming from the right, from the conservative side now too. So now any sort of reasonable person is not going to be what I said in my piece is you're going to need to double fist this mantra. I don't subscribe to that.
For our audience's sake, define the tide.
Well, what is now being referred to as the Great Awakening, but was called something else, anywhere from roughly 2012 to 2014, this shift in culture, at least as defined by media outlets that you and I either have worked for or are considered the kind of culture defining standards. So not non-conservative magazines, print, newspapers, NPR, that whole sphere has, I think, and very much including music journalism, has accelerated down this track that you and I both felt like the madness of instantly. I remember feeling this right away, and it has accelerated to a degree that is just unsustainable. Now, you can say that there are certain markers that show that things have slowed down or tempered themselves, but I don't. I'm not quite sure where we are, and it certainly hasn't happened enough. And the people in control of these cultural and media institutions, the people who think they have the reins of culture, they are not going to let it go without a fight, as we can see from some of the things you have planned to talk about today.
Look, I think what we have seen in the period that you're describing is this sort of um, we're seeing media become infinite and incredibly narrow at the same time. So we're here on a media podcast right now where we're going to discuss a couple different things that have been discussed a lot over the last week or so. Candace Owens for one. We're going to go into Diddy and his circumstance for another. We're going to bring a perspective that's a little bit different than the ones that would come from, let's say, NPR, let's say CBS News, or wherever. And the fact that we could just hop on and, I mean, for and just have this and have people listen to us and have, after our last chat, I had full throated arguments about Shannon Sharp with a bunch with dozens of people. Like the fact that you could have that kind of engagement in a one-on-one basis in this era allows for this sort of shift in perspective. It becomes territorial, as I think we saw with NBC News and Ramla McDaniel, um, and the fact that, hey, how dare we bring in anyone from Trump world into our sacred grounds of
Mhm.
MSNBC? Um, and I think you also see that with Candace Owens, where it's like, how dare someone under our umbrella go to a place that we find uncomfortable, where you
Mhm.
have a right leaning outlet that's like, hey, you're not in our corner of right wing America, therefore, or you disagree with a chunk of our corner of right wing America, therefore you get go get away from us. And I think the fact that you can have an impromptu conversation with just about anyone on on uh, on social media and digital media, and the fact that you can't and the fact that some of these can scale to different levels, and you have these big monoliths getting smaller in
Mhm.
terms of audience size. It creates a friction. Add the secret sauce of sort of this weird political period that we're in right now, where we are increasingly unstable, and and everybody is increasingly territorial, and they want to, they're know-it-alls, everybody, including myself, right, to a certain degree, where we feel strongly about a certain idea or concept or belief structure that's moved to the center of American life in a way that we haven't seen in a very, very long time. And when the last time we saw this, and I'd say you can argue 60s, 70s, you could argue, but I think there's always been some strain of this. But when it came first and forefront, we didn't have this kind of media environment where you can have a startup like the Daily Wire compete with something like MSNBC.
Mhm.
Um, and and then there's the economic undergirding, which is shaking all of these places. Everybody's scared, as we've talked about over these many of weeks. as I can't stop talking about day to day. Everybody's scared. They're scared to stay up. They're scared that their places are not going to be around, or they're not going to make as much money. Um, and I think you end up with this supercharged, weird environment where you have circumstances like the Candace Owens one.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like overall in culture, at least the way you and I experience culture, like that sort of sphere or dome, that biodome of culture that you and I exist in. Certainly, you and I have also peered outside of that,
Sure.
but um, it does feel like there is a slight loss of grip on the steering wheel.
Sure.
Um,
No, well, that slide, I think Slide underplays it. I think there is a loss. There's a massive loss.
yeah, but there's this. It's almost like what I imagine the people in the French Revolution were saying to themselves before their world came crashing down. I actually tweeted
Oh,
that
interesting.
in response to the Huberman piece,
Yeah.
um, because it's like, man, you like once you're stuck on this idea that you have the reins, I don't know what shakes people off that except some kind of violent cataclysmic shock to their system. And what you're describing is that exists in conservative media world too. But I think where we're headed is something that you have predicted and you said you fear, which is that we'll get some kind of monstrous hybrid of like the conservative version of this hyper controlling way of interacting and the residual traces of this like cultural revolution Maoist insanity that we've experienced from people who identify as progressives, right? Like I think we're probably going to be in a place where like there's going to be tripwires on both sides.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. Um, I don't know. Not sure I'd call it Maoist, but I think I get where you're coming from. I do think that anyone who thinks that the big media monoliths are going to just go away, that's not going to happen. Some of them will. And I think we do see shaky ground on under them. I think right now it looks like CBS right now is on the shakiest ground of them all. They're going to have to make a very big debt payment. They're probably going to be sold. They're like the leading bidder right now is a vulture capital company, a company that comes in and strip mines companies. The family owner, Sherry Redstone, wants to sell it to a company, but the deal might not be as good. But it is a public company, so you can't. If you do that, it's a problem. Um, so we're going to see a lot of these companies sort of just get break down into pieces,
Mm.
not be as powerful, but they're going to still have a certain a level of control in society because we have this sort of especially in America, we love our institutions as much as we hate them. We love them. We give our institutions a certain level of power, and I think just the even like a place like U.S. News and World Report, for example, which doesn't have the heft that it on any level that it used to, it still has a sort of a bit of a punch just because they are that. Because they once were, because of what they once were.
Well,
So go ahead.
and how long is this going to take to cycle out of the systems of education, workplace decorum, like those cultures with the people running them, particularly white women, if we're being totally blunt, in terms of education anyway, and in higher academia, healthcare. Once certain ideological strains seeped into those places, I think even if the mainstream culture moves away from them, that shit's going to be slow. I'm guessing.
Yeah, I don't think they're going away.
Mm,
I think that the thought that wokeism, especially once wokeism is like has seeped into the sort of infrastructure of existing entities that aren't going to fall away, and we're talking businesses, schools like that. I think that they're going to be there. These people got really scared with the Floyd thing and with everything that happened over the last few years, and with chunks of their organization, both in terms of the management and professors, and their students, their customers, the people who make them money, all making demands at once. Then they went, they changed things, and it's once they have made those changes, undoing those changes takes a long, long time, and they usually don't. There's usually appendages of them over time. So I
that
don't.
stay that remain. You're saying the appendages of
Absolutely,
the, yeah.
absolutely. I expect, uh, once these places made the shifts that they did, I expect them to keep them, and until there are financial, and I mean grave financial consequences, I
Mm,
expect them to stay in place, and even when there are, I think they'll stay in place. And especially when it comes to something like a college or a corporation, I think corporations are the ones where there are some possibilities. I mean, look at the Bud Light situation. It's a perfect example where it's like all of a sudden they're throwing money at the UFC, and um and comedians left and right. Why? Okay, they got themselves in trouble with the Dylan Mulvaney thing.
mhm.
And then there was a backlash. So like there's more of a consequence there when it comes to capitalistic institutions. But when it comes to an institution um like a college, there's really not as much. In fact, in order to keep harmony on campus, they might accept, the fact that hey, we're gonna have to lose a little. I mean, I have nothing against something like women's studies as a major or a concept. Like, look, cool, enjoy it. But in terms of creating value beyond college, in colleges, w- how?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, yeah. But it kept a certain cohort within these institutions happy. So these institutions invested in it.
I think it
And
did.
that's how they work.
I think to extend on what you're saying, it did slightly more than keep a certain cohort happy. It installed a sense among, it's like a certain specialized class of people. So there's the economic class, but then there's like a certain um vocation. It's almost a vocation, like, okay, you are going to be the stewards of culture from now on. Regardless of whether this degree will help you get a job, you'll be writing for prestigious media outlets. You'll be writing books. You'll be teaching college courses to the next generation. You see what I mean? It kind of confers a sense on certain people, like, okay, you get to define and tell us what we are as a society. And I feel like that is extremely tantalizing and addicting to this group of people. And that's what I mean, because you were talking about the media institutions themselves, and now you're talking about the culture. I'm also talking about the mindset of the people that populate these institutions. They are they've had, a decade to think that, oh, we're the ones who get to tell people what to do. We can be the fucking thought police now. And boy, oh boy, are they hooked on that, no matter what evidence to the contrary, no matter how much pushback. And I mean, yeah, I actually benefited from taking women's studies classes in college. I thought they were fascinating. But what I imagine women's studies to be today in this fucking warped Orwellian like miasma of unreflective, just rote repetition of this nonsense. My God, that would be horrible. And right, it has no practical application other than just to keep the people in charge of culture thinking that they are. No matter what that's why I bring up the French Revolution, because like there had to be a moment where it was like, yo, it's clear your fucking head is on the chopping block here and you're not getting this. You're just so in denial because they can't conceive of a world where they're not. And so yeah, it's going to be interesting. That's for sure. I wonder how many people. You're right. I feel like colleges will take a loss to preserve their identity, but I also wonder whether some colleges won't do sort of what Bud Light did, maybe not as quickly, because that was a quick about face. You're saying that the
Mhm.
about face doesn't happen so quick a lot of the
Not
time.
not in a college environment.
How many colleges do you think will realign themselves around principles like free speech, open exchange of ideas, free expression, open debate, due process? How many colleges do you think might, or how
We're
much do you
talking
think
percentages?
something like that? Yeah.
Very few.
Mm,
I think there's a larger thing going on demographically. This is something I've spent the last few days marinating on and reading about various people. We're gonna be running into a demographic crunch. There's gonna be a lot less young people. We're also gonna have clearly economic. I think a lot of people want to throw around words like depression like that. That's not what I mean. What's clear is that things are slowing down, and they're going to be slowing down for a while. And when times are tougher economically, there's less tolerance for this kind of thing. And when the feed for these places are less, meaning we literally are below replacement in terms of our birth rate, there's going to be less kids to go to these institutions. So we're already seeing very small liberal arts institutions close. We're going to see that intensify over the next
mm.
decade, decade and a half. And we're going to see the competition for kids grow, 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 grow. And once that happens, as that happens, and as the next cohort of kids wants something different, we'll also see a shift of the thing they offer, how they operate.
Hmm.
But they're not going to do it because it's the right thing to do. Like nothing like that's going to happen on a sunny day. They're not altruistic. They thought they were altruistic in order by doing what they did.
Yeah, I mean, I guess yeah, clearly, I guess I'm asking, when is the pressure going to get to be enough that enough of them will
Only when it
respond?
becomes economically an economic incentive.
Mm,
Like without an economic incentive, it's not going to happen.
mm. What do you think about the type of people who write and support things in media that fit this stereotype that we're talking about? When will they, do you think, be deposed by a new crop, a new mindset?
Be more specific.
Well, I'm thinking of Huberman. I didn't want to like
Okay.
impose that
Well, we
that
could go into Huberman. I mean, so Andrew Huberman, he's a massive podcaster. We um uh Spotify just released its top podcaster followers on followings on their network and on their platform. And Huberman was up right up there. He had something like 4 million followers on Spotify alone. Just to put it into perspective, Joe Rogan's was over 13 million, and he was top dog. Huberman was in the fourth or fifth position. Huberman had a hit piece put out on him, which I kind of avoided for most of this week, just because like I don't. I'm Huberman's not really my bag. I'm not really all that interested in him. I've seen a couple interviews, but I just never really. He's not one of the guys who grabbed me until you brought it up to my attention, and I read it. And you said it was 10,000 pages, 10,000
Oh,
not pages, but 10,000 words.
Kat Rosenfeld said on Ethan Strauss that it's 10,000 words. She might have been exaggerating.
Yeah. Okay. Somewhere between 5 and 10,000 words. It's a very long piece. And I don't understand how the hell this was written. This is a relationship that went sour. It looks like he did cheat on his girlfriend, who he talked about having a family with. And beyond that, I don't understand the rationale for it being put forth in New York Magazine.
Well, see, I do. I understand what the people who decided to do this are thinking because they're trying to preserve this established code
Mhm.
that the personal belongs to the public and that anyone's personal infractions can be used against them in the court of public opinion. They've weaponized the court of public opinion, and that's one of the things these people are not letting go. I didn't finish the piece because I thought it was whiny. No, let me just say for the record, I don't like Andrew Huberman at all. I find him very unappetizing. I literally, whenever I see his face, click away so I don't have to hear him talk. So there's two things going on here for me. On the one hand, I find it kind of delightful and delicious that this person who positions himself as like a optimize your neurology kind of guru proves to be fucking human and fucking up in his personal life because I find figures like that revolting, and I think that the investment that people make in them is really unhealthy. Kind of like Jordan Peterson, like clean your room. It's like, well, why don't you get over your fucking benzo addiction first before you start telling people to clean their room? Okay, buddy. Do you clean your shit up first, and then come back to us and start talking to people like you're everyone's dad, because you're not. Deal with that shit. Deal with your own parenting and your own fucking house in order, literally and figuratively. Similarly with the public, why are you looking for parental figures in podcasters? Like, why are you looking? Like, I'm sure Huberman gives good advice. That's great. But even guys like Steven Pinker, who doesn't position himself quite with the same, oh, I know everything kind of. And it's like the whole like archetype of the pop scientist, I just find sickening. And then the pop scientist as guru, fuck that. So that's satisfying for me on the one hand, but then you've got this author of this piece in New York who's clearly coming at this from like, we're still in the days of Me Too, where, where
Carrie Hawley.
yes, thank you. That's I was just looking her up. Where, oh my goodness, I bought into this podcaster and I was really into him, and then I started doing a story on him, and I discovered all these things that I'm uncomfortable with, and because I haven't resolved my own relationship with my parents, I'm not saying that's necessarily the case for her, but that's how these people come across. Like, oh my goodness, Andrew Huberman has a secret double life, and it's like there's this incredible disappointment. It's like, well, why were you this invested in somebody else to begin with? What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, can you not separate someone's public persona from their private actions and understand they don't owe you purity? Fuck that. Like let's blow that idea up. So I find this to be a holdover of a very childish, infantile mindset that, in particular, white women in media positions of authority, you're going to have to pry it from their proverbial cold dead hands. That's what they're saying. Like you're not taking this away from me. We want the right to sort of besmirch anybody. And Huberman seems whatever. If you're juggling 6 women and you're not telling them, okay, that's douchey. So the fuck what? That's not my business. I don't give a fuck. And also, don't women who follow a dude like this sense that he has options? Don't they know? Yes, they do. They have instincts. They know that, like, or are they thinking, oh well, I know he's this big game catch of a mate, but I'm gonna make him loyal to me. And is that maybe what we should be looking at instead of, oh, douchey, man in position of power is so terrible and fuck, who cares?
There's a few different threads I want to pull on.
Of course.
You said, why are we looking for parental figures in podcasting? Which is fascinating. I think we could spend like 6 hours talking about that alone.
Sure.
I think we are looking for parental figures, period. I could see that in the treatment of Joe Biden. I see that in the treatment of Donald Trump. I saw that with Barack Obama, the whole great man in history that's going to show up and save the day theory. It's a very I don't think it's strictly American, but it's incredibly American. We see this. I think in podcasting it happens a lot because you are spending this intimate time with this person. I used to work at USA Today, and I hosted this show that was called 5 Things. It's now called The Excerpt. And when I would hear from our listeners, and I still hear from them to this day, they remember stray pieces of things that I said offhandedly. They felt like they were my friend. They felt like they were a part of my life, and I was a part of their life because they spent hours upon hours with me, more than they do with their friends or family. Because if you look at some of that recent data that's come out, we spend, especially as we get older, in 30s and on, we spend less time with friends. We spend less time with even our kids. It's us usually working, and increasingly us working with headphones on. And we're listening to somebody. And I think that's why a guy like Huberman, that's why Jordan Peterson, that's why, Ben Shapiro, you could go on and on and on. And it's not just folks on the right, it's people across the board. That's why the people love the smartless guys, so they dig them because they're spending time with them, just like the people who are spending time with us right now. They want it. They feel like they have an idea of who we are because, as I create something, as you create something, we're sharing a piece of our skin with them. And I think that's why, that's one reason why. I think also we're in this period in terms of parental figures in media where the world feels unstable, incredibly so. And every day, every day or every week, at the same time, you are hearing from the same person. It's this consistency. It's this thing. It's this power of media. And this is why the media scheduling thing is freaking brilliant. Because and as your life is increasingly unstable, as you're going through your shit,
Mhm.
As your kid is yelling at you, you're fighting with your spouse, you hate your boss, your car might break down, but you know you got this consistent voice that shows up at the same time, same place all the time. And I think that's one reason why. In an increasingly unstable personal world, plus we look at this financial taxing. Also, I think in a case like Huberman, part of it
Mhm.
is the health aspect of it. Our health increasingly sucks as Americans. Like we get little for our health care. We pay more for it, but it's not working. It's not working for us. And because it's not working for us, we're looking for people who have answers. And it's like it's the same thing you would hear from cult leaders back in the day. Same thing you hear from politicians. You see this even like people like Goop and Gwyneth Paltrow, and you go on through the ages. People who claim they have an answer for a problem that a bunch of people are having, and they can offer it consistently. They're able to develop a flock. So I think it's a combination of that. And I could go on for 8 hours on this, as you know, but that's what came to mind with that question. I have other pieces I'd love to pull out, but if you'd like to respond to that,
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I understand, and I'm attempting to send you a meme that I think speaks to this. To
yeah,
this,
you email me.
I'm gonna send it to you in the chat. Do you want me to?
Yeah,
I'm
email me,
um. Okay, I'm.
or you gotta put it in the chat.
Yeah, I can just put it in the chat.
Okay, private chat.
Because it speaks perfectly to what you're what you're describing. Will that automatically send like that, or do I have to like fuck?
Yeah, hit
Um,
the arrow in the
yeah,
thing.
it's not even loading in the
Well,
shit. Come
well,
on.
send me an email, but
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
we'll,
yeah,
we'll
yeah. I
we'll
mean,
be talking.
I mean, uh, that's all good and fine. I actually just wrote a piece titled "A New Way to Look at Left and Right." This is also on my Substack. Everyone's just looking for their parents. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yes, we are.
um, it's a long held theory that I've had that what we see from both conservatives and progressives, generally speaking, sort of tracks to these two big, um, what I just describe as like ink splotches or watercolor splotches, where you can make this generalization that um, progressives largely, and I'm an exception to this, but progressives have, by and large, if you're making huge sweeping generalizations, have grown up in like overly permissive homes that are defined by lenient mom energy, and so
What
they
mom energy?
lenient
Lenient
mom
mom
energy.
energy. Okay.
Um, and again, I'm somewhat of an exception to this, but so there's lots of people that are like, no, that's not me. I'm a progressive, blah, 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 blah. But where we are in the culture as like a useful archetype to start with, um, progressives, they want freedom. They want permissiveness from social rules, but they will run to government to act as their parents, which is a paradox, right? There's a contradiction there between those two impulses. Like, no, I want freedom. I want to have sex. I want to have, be able to have abortions. I don't want your fucking religion dragging me down, blah, blah, blah. I don't need all this shit. But the moment the government says, I will step in and be your parent. Masumi sent me that.
Yeah. For those of you
Mas-
not watching, um, well, we're looking at a meme that says how it feels to listen to podcasts.
oh my god.
And what you have is a skaterish girl sitting with her legs crossed, Indian style, as we used to call it back in the day, next to a poster with three girls.
Well, she's
That's
eating ice cream. I thought it was a boy, by the way, but
that a
whoever
boy?
it is, this kid is eating ice cream, just so satisfied, laughing next to a poster of three girls eating ice cream, and like feels like the skater kid feels like they're part of the scene, and they're obviously not because that's two dimensional. Masumi
Yeah,
sent me that after her boyfriend was telling me exactly what you were saying. Um, her partner Angelo, shout out to both of them. He
yeah.
was
Shout out
like
to
talking about
Masumi.
how, yeah, he was like talking. Masumi's awesome. Uh, he was talking about how I listen to Bill Burr, and when you listen to podcasts on a regular basis, it's like they become a part of your life. Exactly what you were saying. They become a part of your day. These people, their presence. Um, but I think we have to be careful not to look. Just sort out your shit with your feelings towards your own parents. Don't look to other people to be this for you, or you're going to get in trouble. And the tone of the New Yorker, or the New York article was like, wow, I was doing his, and I was really into his podcast, and it made a difference for me. And then I discovered this thing. And Sagar and Getty pointed out that he's got emails showing that she initially approached Huberman talking about how she wanted to write a glowing profile on him, and then that turned into dirt digging, basically through his personal trash to find shit. And then all these women started talking to each other. And whenever that happens, you get this amplification effect. And so, anyway, my theory on the political divide in the USA currently is people who lean left or identify as progressive largely have grown up in permissive homes without a lot of rules, without too much structure. They're given a lot of autonomy, and they have moms who are very lenient. I talk about this a lot. How moms in modern moms need to get back in touch with their throat chakra and fucking get back in touch with their mom's superpower to say no. Parents are terrified of telling their fucking kids no, and it drives me crazy. Um, and um, so people who lean left are craving this permissiveness from social rules, but they're unconsciously craving a parent who's actually doesn't neglect them, where they don't feel neglected, where they feel a more firm presence. So they seek that in government. And that's a paradox that's not resolved. Conversely, conservatives, if we're going to be stereotyping, harsh dad energy at home. They
Hmm.
want, and they project that onto government. They're like, no, I don't want government telling me freedom, 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 freedom. But they're the first to dive in with both feet when religion or social rules dictate the way you're supposed to be. Oh, now we're all about that shit, right? Another paradox, because daddy was too harsh, right? So they want to they crave something that's sort of like they react to the thing they don't like, but then crave something else unconsciously that is directly oppositional to that thing. And so this is why we have these two tribes that are fucking at each other's throats and projecting so much onto each other, because they just need to like sort out what they feel towards their own parents. Millions of people will raise their hand and say, that's not me, that's not my family background, blah blah blah. I am an exception to that, but I think as a general starting point, there's something there. So when the next time you see these two people, blah, 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 or somebody opposing you, just understand they're not reacting to you. They have this craving to sort of resolve something that's unresolved.
Interesting. I I would not have taken it there. Did not. see the split on the conservative liberal mom versus dad that sounds vaguely Jungian and almost Peterson esque of you. Jordan
Oh,
Peterson
well,
esque.
to what do I owe the dubious honor? If you're talking about Jordan Peterson in his classroom, I'm flattered by the comparison. If you're talking about this fucking, you know, organ grinding circus monkey figure who just spouts all this Myers-Briggs bullshit, then I'm, but somewhere in there there's the same guy, but they seem like two different people.
Well, I was gonna go in a different direction, but can I share with you a bit of the Destiny conversation
Yeah,
with
well,
Jordan Peterson?
yes. Can I tell you about my experience at the canal watching two little boys throw rocks at ducks and what the
Okay,
women were doing and what the dad, because this is illustrative. I started to write a Substack piece about this titled "For God's Sake, Stop Saying Please to Your Children." Um, and super quick.
okay,
So these
I think
two
it's
little
pretty
boys, about 3 and 5,
yeah,
were at the canal. My daughter was with me. We were riding bike, and then her mom, her stepdad, and then their little boy was there too. And the canal was mostly drained, so it was like real, like there's not much water, and the ducks were like walking around at the bottom. So these two little boys, about 3 and 5, come with their aunt and their mom. And they're, as little boys do, they're throwing these big fucking hunks of rock. They're not trying to hit the ducks. They're not being malicious little monsters. But of course, these Pittsford moms, and I see this so much. This is not just white women anymore. This has spread like a fucking cancer. They're like, now, this incredibly timid voice. Now, we're not trying to hurt the ducks. And of course, these two little fuckers are not registering that. Now they're not trying to be mean, but they're laughing and it's not getting into their fucking skull. So I'm sitting there watching this, and I cannot stand. I'm so repulsed whenever I see this. So the dad comes, and he's like, "What are we doing? I don't want them throwing rocks at ducks." Like, no, they've got to stop now. And one of the ladies just looks at him. Her eyes are like saucers, as if he had just done the most horrific thing. Like she's just looking at him bug-eyed. And then one of the kids, he's like, "No, we're going now." And one of the kids starts screaming, "Dude!" I wanted to fucking get up and applaud. I could have hugged the guy. I'd be like, "You deserve a medal, sir, for taking action here and putting the fucking kibosh on this shit." Like, and how often, James, do you hear, "Okay, Johnny, let's go inside, please. Let's go." And Johnny doesn't give a fuck what his mom and increasingly dads are saying. He hears the conciliatory tone in your voice, and you got to tell him 3 and 4 times. My daughter knows I'm not even firm. I don't even raise my voice that often. I don't get authority. Like I'm just like, okay, I don't want to have to ask you twice. Just like, and what happened that we got scared to say no to kids? And so I'm like, parents, for God's sake, stop saying please. You're already conceding your authority. Kids want and need and crave your authority. I'll tell you another quick story, not to be self-indulgent here.
no, it's quite all right. Do your thing.
So I go to pick my daughter up at school twice a week, and I drop her off the other 3 days. And so that's my time to hang with the parents. And that's kind of like me going out to a bar. It's like at the playground. And on one day, I go with the two dads are there, and then this mom from a French family who, like, we all love talking to each other. And then the other day, it's two moms and then the same French mom. And so the French little boy, he's much older than my daughter, and he's a rough customer. He wants to tear shit up, and so I start hurling these like French like mean things at him. I'm like, "Nous ne sommes pas les sauvages, les babas," and like the kids, his sister and him, like they think it's funny. And so one day he starts throwing wood chips at me. I'm like, yo, dude. So I said this in English and I was totally serious. I'm like, if you hit me with one of those wood chips, I'm going to hold you upside down just to the point that somebody will die from being held upside down. In other words, don't fuck with me.
Wow.
And what does he do? What does he do right after this? He
He
smiles at
fucks
me
with
and
you.
he goes to his no, no. He
No?
smiles at me and he goes to his mom, "Mommy, do we have to leave?" He's like, "Oh, mom, do we have to leave?" Like he's like smiling at me. He's like, "Yeah, because with boys, you need to fucking do that. You need to be like, yo, man, I obviously wasn't going to hold him upside down till the blood, you know, his brain had an aneurysm or whatever. But I was going to pick him up and hold him upside down and be like, you're not doing this to me without consequence." And this is what we need to get back to. Like, okay, kid, you'll be fine if I say no. You're not going to die if I say no to you. Why are we like, please, please, can you please do this? Can you please? It's like, no, I need you to do this. And that's it. You don't even need to hit your kids. You don't need to scream at them. You don't need to be a disciplinarian. You don't need to be a drill sergeant. Just know that when you ask them to do something, you can have the dignity of expecting that they will reasonably comply. And that has been annihilated. And that is feeding so much of this. I went to Andrew Huberman and oh my goodness, he's got 6 girlfriends. And oh, what am I going to do with that? So
I didn't expect you to take that there. That was wow. Parenting lessons from Stabby Reyes Kulkarni.
yeah, and I could talk about all my parenting fuck ups, but look, moms out there, get back in touch with your superpower in your throat chakra. You are moms. You're the ones shaping boys more than dads are. Let's not forget this shit. Everything we complain about with boys, who is the one instilling all of this? Who's the one showing them an example of womanhood that they either respect or they don't? In fact, I would say to American upper middle class mothers, society is depending on you to be firm with your boys, to show them this is a line you do not fucking cross. And when I ask you to do something, you do it. You don't have to be abusive. Previous generations were abusive. They hit kids. Dude, I went to school, nuns were hitting kids in elementary school. Like, just that is fucking insane. But now we've swung all the way. Like, please, come on. I need you to do this, please. No, fuck, please. Like, just, I need you to cooperate with me so that we can all do our thing. That's all.
This brings me back to something that you mentioned, a note that I want to touch on now. Your description here. You said earlier that the personal belongs to the public.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that in context of this whole Huberman piece. And I believe you were alluding back to the previous conversation as we were talking just broadly with this sort of awakening period of American history. What do you mean by that? Please expound.
I mean, my relationship indiscretions don't belong to you, and fuck you if you think I owe you an apology for things that have occurred between me and people in my life. And everybody needs to adopt that stance. I will apologize if I have anything to own. Well, undoubtedly, this is every person talking. Undoubtedly, there are things I must own in relationships that have hurt other people. I owe it to those people. If I owe them any apology at all, I owe it to them. I don't owe you shit. I don't owe the public shit. I don't owe this cartel of women writers and the men who now enable them in positions of editorial. Like, my personal life is my fucking business, barring anything criminal. So fuck off if you think that anything anybody does belongs to us. It doesn't.
Yeah, it's interesting. Here's my counter, and I'm not sure I totally believe this, but I do believe this is probably the argument you would get. When you choose to be a public figure, you're choosing to expose yourself and the people around you to public scrutiny, to a level of scrutiny that didn't have to happen. It happened because of a choice that you made. You
Yes.
you got in front of the microphone. You was in the case of Andrew Huberman. You put yourself out front and first, out in front and first, as this authority on how we should live. And if you're not living well when you are espousing yourself as an authority figure on how we should live, you are a hypocrite. What do you say?
Here's okay. So I'd respond to that a number of ways. That is a fair point in Huberman's case or any of these fucking guru daddy types. Like, I'm not looking for a dad, right? So I don't project that onto these people. Even my favorite Buddhist monk, who I think gives the greatest advice in human history that I have come across, a guy named Thich Nhat Hanh, who died in 2022, I believe, or 2021. I would not project this adulation onto him. The first thing I would say is that in the past, while the public was hungry for tabloid gossip, we did not feel we did not feel propriety over someone's personal life the same way we do now, because we had a healthier understanding amongst our own families. And well, there's certain things, yeah, that person says they're in a rough relationship, but if we were a fly on the wall, maybe we'd see a different story than either one of us. So let's just kind of leave that alone. Maybe that was to a fault, but there was a sense of division. Like, that's their business. You would hear people fucking say that as a matter of
Mm,
everyday speech.
sure.
Nah, that's not our business. So now the public feels everything somebody else has done is our business. Also, we are all, to some degree, if we're plugged in creating any content, we're now all public figures. And so and the other thing is, public figures tend to be people who want to be recognized for their work. They're not asking for all the other intrusion that comes with it, right? You're right about Huberman. That's why I find him so obnoxious and so smug, and that's why I've never even wanted to look at his stuff, because he comes. I mean, Louis C.K. came across with that same, like, sage kind of vibe. Remember,
Mhm.
before his scandal, he just,
Sure.
people would ask him about all sorts of important issues, and it's like, who the fuck?
Well,
Like,
I think it's more a media problem than anything. I think we treat our I think it just to help you a couple of things. A, the media used to behave around people, public figures, much differently than they do now. JFK and Marilyn Monroe is
mhm.
one glaring example. Another glaring example is if going back to FDR and and him being paralyzed, and also him being a serial philanderer as well. And those things weren't reported.
Oh shit!
Yeah, they weren't reported. Like the media
I didn't
knew
even know that.
that he was paralyzed, that he was in a wheelchair, and he just wasn't reported. Also, he was a philanderer, and it wasn't reported. It was widely known.
And
Um,
look, don't we all have things that we would prefer not to be? I mean, everybody does. You're right. Huberman is like, his podcast isn't, hey, here's my relationship fuck ups podcast, right? He's not like, here's how I'm human and flawed podcast with Andrew Huberman. He's like, oh, just optimize your fucking. But
yeah,
I mean, it's still not our fucking business. And we weren't there for these conversations. And so a New York writer who's disappointed because she bought into his podcast and now discovers all this unseemly stuff, I don't trust her to tell us a balanced version of that story. And I don't fucking care. If you're wanting to have a kid with Andrew Huberman, that's on you. It's not my business.
all right. Want to hit bit this Destiny bit?
Yeah. Since
I
we're on
think
the
it's for
subject
the of gurus, and I thought this was a fascinating circumstance. Are you familiar with Destiny?
no.
Destiny is a Twitch streamer primarily, who in recent years has interjected himself in a lot of political conversations, as an uber leftist. And to his credit, he sat down with Peterson, who's not an uber leftist at all. And this is a slice of it, and that had to do with climate change.
Mm.
I think it's pretty undeniable at this point that there is an impact on climate across the planet. I
think that's highly deniable. We have no idea what the impact is from. We don't know where the carbon dioxide is from. We can't measure the warming of the oceans. We have terrible temperature records going back 100 years. Almost all the terrestrial temperature detection sites were first put outside urban areas, and then and then you have to correct. Then you have to correct for the movement of the urban areas, and then you introduce an error parameter that's larger than the purported increase in temperature that you're planning to measure. This isn't data. This is guess. And there's something weird underneath it. There's something weird that isn't oriented well towards human beings underneath it. It has this guise of compassion. Oh, we're going to save the poor in the future. It's like that's what the bloody communists said. And they killed a lot of people doing it. And we're walking down that same road now with this insistence that, we're so compassionate that we care about the poor 100 years from now. And if we have to wipe out several 100 million of them now, well, that's a small price to pay for the future utopia. And we've heard that sort of thing before. And the alternative to that is to stop.
Yes.
First of all, what's up with that fucking jacket? like we have to stop and ask about that. What the fuck? I mean, he might as well be wearing a fucking cowboy hat and a bolo. Okay. One thing that stands out about this to me is it's like equivalent levels of hysteria, right? Right. So there's the climate. I mean, I'll leave you to unpack because you've worked in media reporting on climate change and I'll leave you to unpack that. But this whole it's what communists did. I mean, he has a point, certainly. And what is that truism? Never be so scared than someone who thinks they're doing something for the public good. I forgot it. Was it Mark Twain who said that? I'll have to look that up. But yeah, I get it. But I feel like Peterson is just as hysterical as the people he's accusing of drumming up climate hysteria. Don't you think?
No.
Okay. All right.
And this is more personal than reporting. I wouldn't go this as a reporter, but personally, I feel this strongly. And I think this fits with so many other things in our time, including some of the things that we've talked about earlier today. There is this false certainty that is going through so many of our choices and so many of our thoughts publicly in our time. We assume that we understand everything that's ever happened on this planet and the effects of everything that's going to happen, both deep into the future and deep into the past. When we make those assumptions all the time about so many different things, and it's wildly it leads to inaccurate things. And also, I am wary. Leave the communism stuff out of there, the socialism stuff. I'm wary of anyone who says, hey, we need to restructure our lives drastically for something we're not certain about.
And then insist that you talk about it as if there is certainty. I get that.
Yeah.
Here's where I would push back, although I agree with you.
That speaks to religion. That's
Sure.
religion. That's
Sure.
that's not science.
Here's where I push back, although I agree with you. So I'm pushing back, but not all the way to the other
Bring it.
side. So what you're saying, I think, absolutely holds water. But here's the other side of it to balance this out. I don't fucking trust free market cowboys to diagnose this issue either. Not nowhere.
Agreed.
I 0% trust them or the administrators who are like, oh, we're doing this for your own good and blah blah blah. We need to like, zero emissions and all this other stuff and electric cars and yeah, fuck those people. But also the people that Peterson, I would say, I suspect tap dances for. I don't. And again, I'm not saying that with any. I don't know where he gets his money from or whatever.
Who do you? I mean, who do you suppose that is?
He's a frustrating figure because he makes himself easy. I've been saying this for years, to accuse of being the stereotypical boogeyman he gets accused of being. He baits it in a way that I think is irresponsible and also doesn't honor his intellect as well as he should. He sounds to me like someone who stumps for, well, we know the people who are pushing the climate agenda are full of shit. So, by the way, climate has to be completely unreal. That's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
There could be a fucking problem. It's just not being addressed properly by the people claiming to address it. Oh, and by the way, the free market, like free market, like those religion, that religion isn't going to get us out of that mess either. And I think those are the people he panders to.
Well, I do think that those people are attracted to him to a certain degree. And just to address the broader point, look, I think that certainly climate is changing. Climate change is inherently, like, it's a thing. The question is, what is the problem? How big of a problem are we talking about? And if there is a problem, can any of our actions do anything to change that?
And how much of our actions been responsible for what the problem?
Even beyond that, I mean, because fair, let's say what we did in the past, because we don't have time machines. We can't go and undo the Industrial Revolution, right? It happened. Petrocarbons happened. We got cars. We moved into cities. We are using a level of energy now that kings of the past did not use. Just me and you in this conversation. What we're doing, if they saw what we were doing right now, they would think it would be freaking magic. All right?
They'd want to sign up to Andrew Huberman's podcast to get there.
For sure. So that's why, like, hey, whether it's our fault or not, I'm more concerned about what we can do going forward, and if we can do anything going forward. Is this a period of history where we have done something that is, I think of, I was watching this great video on Haiti in Hispaniola, I believe,
Dominican
is the name
Republic.
of it. The island, and how the Dominican Republic is flourishing, and Haiti is a shit show. And why is Haiti a shit show? In part because of deforestation. They burned down all their trees. They went through this period where they fucked up all their natural resources. Okay. All right. Knowing that, there's not much we could do. It happened. It's in the past. We could try. I'm not saying we can plan for the future. You could replant a bunch of those trees. You could make an effort so that 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the future, things are okay. But we can't go back and to tell the people back in the early 1900s to not go and take down these trees, because it's already happened.
No, but you could have a more measured conversation. Like,
Yeah,
like
sure.
you could have a more measured conversation. I do think climate hysteria from the usual suspects, like the people pushing climate change, like especially like when you search grants and you see that the language of grants is like fucking identical
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
over and over and over, and the way it's being conflated with marginalized community and BIPOC and like impacts,
sure.
it's like something is up there with the way this is being manipulated. Also, like how much energy does it fucking take to make electric cars? Right? It's like oh, like all these practical
A lot.
concerns.
Yeah,
And you got these people doing climate conferences and they're all flying there on private fucking jets, which is annoying. Right?
Mhm.
So there's clearly something going on. But what, like, the two options we have are such brainless, useless, incoherent forms of shuck and jivery
sure.
to act like, because to me, just intuitively speaking, the idea that the everything we've done since the late 1800s to now, especially
Mhm.
with the amount of garbage and toxic materials we produce, is not having
Mhm.
any impact on the biosphere, that's got to be not
I
true.
I would agree it would have some
Right,
impact.
right. So,
I think Jordan
or
Peterson
maybe
would
even
even agree with
drastic.
that.
What's that?
I think Jordan Peterson would even agree with that.
Yeah, but he would say it in that fucking shuck and jive kind of bullshit, organ grinding way with that stupid jacket. Just wear a fucking cowboy hat, dude. Just become a Canadian cowboy. That's all. Like, look, I have a lot of admiration for a lot of things Jordan Peterson has said. I would love to interview him. I think
Yeah.
he to me he veers from absolutely brilliant to absolutely fucking mind-numbingly stupid, often in the same like, and to just be like, well, we don't know. I'm not saying you're saying this, but like, we don't know, so fuck it.
No,
To
I
me,
am
that's
saying that.
okay.
No,
All
no,
right.
no, no, no. I am saying we don't know. I'm
Okay. Okay.
saying that,
Okay.
that I what I am saying is that um we something is happening. Sure. What's the severity of it? We don't know. Why? Because I sat through the inconvenient truth, and New York City was supposed to be underwater by now. Why? Why? Because I could go back and look at the population bomb, and hey, we were this planet was supposed to be a hellscape. Like
Yes, I'm glad you brought this up. Yes.
even people who I have affinity for, people like Jim Kunstler, all right, who I've met, who I've corresponded with, who I
Me too. Yeah.
respect. This man has been saying for a very long time that peak oil was about to hit us and it was about to destroy us. And I do think we're going to have a problem with oil eventually. But if you talk to him back, if you saw his lectures as I did, as I mainlined in college, I mainlined his lectures while I
They
was
were
in college.
good. They were really good. He was
Yeah,
great. Yeah.
back in the mid 2000s. Right now was supposed to be hell. All right, we shouldn't be able to do this right now.
Right. We were supposed to be deep into what he called the long
A long
emergency. We're supposed to be
emergency.
deep. We're deeper. We're supposed to be in his what he calls world made by
A
hand.
world made by hand. And hey, that stuff could happen. Could happen. And I think to a certain degree, we're gonna have to. I am as time has gone on and I've experienced more and more things, and I am betting on Team Human to figure some of this stuff out.
I
I think
agree
that
with you.
I think we're gonna lose some stuff. I think we probably this may be, for some of the reasons I mentioned earlier, because populations, we seem to be hitting a population wall, and not just the first world country, but the third world countries. And we seem to be hitting a capital wall because basically, with large generations not having large generations of children, therefore we're not going to be able to generate as much capital. It's just basic mathematics. So and then we've also been slowing down in terms of technological innovation, believe it or not. Things have actually things have actually slowed down.
Hmm.
You can point back to the mid 70s. not to say that we have not made advances. I'm saying that we're not making as many advances as you think we would. But for lots of reasons, I think we're going to have a very, very different future. But to say that we know exactly what it is and to make demands on everybody, like New York State, where we live, has made demands on us in particular, like you're not supposed to use plastic bags at freaking stores. Instead, we have burlap bags or not burlap, but other plastic bags, more durable, reusable bags that are more dangerous to the freaking environment than those previous bags.
Where did you look that up? What are you citing as the more dangerous?
Various over the years since. I don't.
Okay.
I can't with the top of my
But you
head.
did look into this though, as
Absolutely.
yeah, okay,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt. Look, these things this is virtue signaling.
So
And
to yourself.
Yes.
It's meant to just mollify you into it's so ridiculous. No,
Look,
I totally hear you on all this.
What I'm saying is it's the unknown. In this era, we are not accepting of saying that we don't freaking know.
Right. And actually, wasn't it you who told me that the climate models were in place in the 70s?
Yeah.
Another time we talked about this.
Look, there's look with the climate models, like it's not like this stuff's not set in stone. Actually, the thing that we in the 1970s that we were obsessing over was global cooling. And at that point, if I remember correctly, I believe it was India that had a mass sterilization campaign.
Fuck, in response to the impending global cooling.
Yeah, things like the population bomb.
Oh boy!
Look,
wow, man.
This is
holy shit.
Look, we remember our leaders are people, and they come to believe things. And whether those things are real or not, or those things are far off in the future or not. Look, the one-child policy is a perfect example of this. China's in utter disarray. We're hearing that. Look, based on their more recent census numbers, they're running out of adult workers. All right. You asked them 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, they were like, "Oh, we have too many people."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Look, this is when you see this happen over and over throughout history, I am very, very wary of turning around and saying, "Hey, like we should just change everything because we know the future and we know what's going on."
I am too, but I'm equally wary of someone like Jordan Peterson being the countervailing voice against that, because so I mean, and again, I do have some admiration for Peterson. Sure. I find him very engaging. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it goes back to what I was saying before, the moral leverage that these things are just sort of infused with, right? And in this case, it's from governments. It's like, well, we're trying to save future generations. And I mean, we've seen from the COVID response that they can't handle something in fucking real time like that's happening like 5 minutes ago. So it's completely suspicious. But my fear is that tuning it out as if we have nothing to be concerned about may prove to be equally disastrous. Now, what you hinted at, which I have often thought about, what if it's going to be a traumatic, like a traumatic upheaval, but at the same time, we will also see lots of human ingenuity to sort of guide us through it at the same time. right? Like exactly what you were saying. Kunstler, who we're both big fans of, and I love emailing him because he always answers. It's so great. Um, and he's funny as shit too. But what if, like, he was saying like, oh, but by now we should have been in a hellscape, and we keep being able to do stuff like this. When I first started reading him, I thought, man, the internet's going to be gone by the time 2020s. We won't have internet. We won't be able to get on planes and go anywhere. I totally bought into that. Like, okay, it's going to be over. There won't be any touring rock bands past a certain point. You know what I mean? I don't know. You definitely bring up a fair point. I just wish there was a more measured conversation about this. I know that when Brett Weinstein, who I no longer look to as a measured voice at all, but I don't think he was completely wrong. I think he was right about a lot of things, actually. When he spoke to Chris Martenson, they both said, Weinstein said, this is where I think the right gets this wrong. He says, because I can remember when there were so many insects and for some reason there aren't. And that is usually a canary in a coal mine for the biosphere. And Martinson was like, I totally hear you on that. I can remember coming home, seeing so many bugs on my screen door, and that's not the case. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to get into the Art Bell, people are manipulating weather conversation here.
Well,
that's not Art Bell, actually. That's
no,
right. Yeah.
Art Bell did go there, but like I'd like to get my ducks in a row before I go down that rabbit hole. Here's what I do know. I do know that we can make it rain. We have been making it rain for more than a century.
More than a century.
Yeah. Close to a century. Cloud seeding.
Okay.
Cloud seeding. We've been cloud seeding. Do we do that all the time? Is it every rainstorm? I don't believe so. But we've been playing around with things like cloud seeding for about a century.
So if that's the case, and I'd have to look into cloud seeding. You've brought this up to me before, but I don't know anything about it. But if that's the case, then what are we not being told about that is currently being used? And
that's the interesting question, right? Like, so how do
and
you?
Is it even?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it even far-fetched to presume that some of this is being manipulated in order to stir up hysteria on purpose, or even disasters? And it's not. I remember thinking that was really far-fetched until you pointed out, well.
Yeah. And just to cloud seed, to show one receipt, it is Wikipedia, but it is a just to share it with you.
But you're saying it's a legit branch of,
like, it's a thing that has been done for a while. Cloud seeding is a type of weather modification that aims to change the amount of and type of precipitation, mitigate hail, or disperse fog. The usual objective is to increase rain or snow, either on its own sake or to prevent precipitation from occurring in the days afterward.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Right. So if that's what's surfaced on Wikipedia, what does the Department of Defense, what are they doing?
And according to Wikipedia, in who cites this book, it looks like future clouds, diomes, speculations, and weather modification. We're talking as far as it's been experimented with in different ways as far as 1891.
Or at least theorized and suggested that it could be done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, look, there's been different aircraft that we've played around with on it. So it's something that I'd rather, if we're going to go down the rabbit hole, I'd rather do that.
Sure, not
get
yet.
my ducks in a row. Is to do that one off the top of my head, because that look, I do think it's a thing that has existed, has been played around with. Um, it's a habit that we have. Is playing around with that kind of thing. Is it reality? Is it? I wouldn't say we're doing it for every storm, but we are doing it some.
Hmm.
So, want to head over to Diddy land, or do you want to
Sure.
head over to Candace?
I mean, I think Diddy is more interesting. I also started writing a piece called "In Defense of Candace Owens," which I was telling you about earlier before we got on mic. But I think the Diddy story is more obviously explosive.
Okay. And in order to introduce Diddy, I'd like to talk about somebody else who's sort of become real interesting in recent times. A guy who we spent an extensive amount of time talking about.
If God's side, if you did.
A guy that we spent a lot of time talking about. Cat Williams appeared on Shannon Sharp's show and Club Shay Shay. And this is what he said about Diddy in that interview.
Prior weeks, months, even now at this point. No, right? Prior to
Months prior.
It's God's side and the other side. And we don't care nothing about the other side. Period. All of these big deviants is all catching hell in 2024. It's up for all of them. It don't matter if you Diddy or whoever you is, TG Jakes, any of them. All lies will be exposed. That's all. And anyone who takes that the wrong way, know why they take it the wrong way. The truth is the light.
And just to set up Diddy further, just to go a little bit deeper in it to explain what's happened. Diddy's 3 residences were raided, and I'll tell. Sabby, did you catch the raid?
I did not. I haven't looked at this story. I'm avoiding it on purpose because I don't trust anything that's like it's just going to become a snowball of moral outrage with the usual people on both, from like both sides of the spectrum.
Sure.
What's the word? Excoriating him for it. And it'll be hard to get actual information. Like my question is, why do these things surface when they surface? That's my first. It's like
That's a tough one. Go on.
Because if this person is involved in the kinds of nefarious things that he's alleged to be involved in, then that would have to mean that other people and presumably the authorities have known about it. And so why now? And like the intensity of the effort. I caught a headline where they raided, like you said, they raided one of his places. And it's just like whenever
3 of his places.
They did, but the headline I saw the one day was they raided, and it's like that kind of like Waco like focus from the government.
If you are accused of sex trafficking, as you know, look, no charges have been filed, but we're talking about potentially sex trafficking. Let's before we like, go further, I'd like to show this to you.
Sure.
Breaking news right now, we're following the Department of Homeland Security conducting a raid at a house in Holmby Field Hills, believed to be connected to Sean Combs, the rapper and music executive, perhaps being linked to a sex trafficking investigation.
He got some shots of a few people coming out of the home. Those people have been detained. Now we're trying to still connect the dots. We do have some sources on scene here that we're getting this information from. We were actually the first ones here with about 30 different law enforcement vehicles at least. There are 3 Bearcats
Whoa.
on scene here. This just all unfolded, Sandra, I would say less than 10 minutes ago. We got here even before the crime scene tape came up. So we're just down the hill. If you look up this street where Tony is right now to the right, you'll see one of those Bearcats and law enforcement. And on the other side of those bushes, basically, is that home that is registered to Bad Boy Films, which is part of Bad Boy Entertainment. The home in particular is registered not only Bad Boy Films, but to one.
Heavily armed, and they've been very tactful would probably be the best word to use as they made entry into this home this afternoon. We actually watched them as they made their way through one of these side gates, and as soon as they got inside the home, one of the first things they did was made their way into this garage that you see is open right there. Now they did take a couple people into custody. We witnessed that. Now, are they under arrest? Are they just being asked about what they know? That I can't answer, but I can tell you there people right there that were taken into custody were inside that home at the time of the raid.
We did see a bunch of investigators going in, making the raid in there and clearing that as well. So they're going to do a thorough search as they conduct this raid. And so far, Stu, from what I understand and from Haley on the ground there, they have not seen, and we have not seen from our vantage point, any sign of Sean Combs, the 54-year-old who is believed to be the property owner of this.
So Sean apparently is in the Bahamas now. He left for the airport as the raids were happening. And it isn't. I know you said that. Why does this stuff happen? And I think it's really interesting question there. I do think we know the feds, they cherry pick when things happen. I think the Trump circumstance this year is a perfect example of that. They waited till this year to push this circumstance down. But in the case of Diddy, it's not a new circumstance. I mean, there's been accusations and allegations with Diddy for quite a long time. This the best timeline I could find was from NPR, who went back to sort of allegations about Diddy deep into the 90s, and having everything from sex to people around him dying, to people think that Shine took the rap for him for a murder. But Shine being a rapper, and it seems to have escalated through the years. If you look at it one by one, when it got to this level of the idea of abuse and sex trafficking, the first time we see stuff like this is about 6-7 years ago.
So again, that's where I raise the question: why now? Why is this coming to a head now? I'm immediately suspicious of that.
Of why it's happening now?
Yeah, I mean, it's like,
So what help me understand? Like what do you mean that there was some rationale to do it now? It wasn't like an insane amount of
well, I mean,
there was
judging
a
from
civil suit not long ago that had all kinds of allegations late last year, that I think raised the temperature on this for sure.
judging from the Epstein case, we can see that it is politically expedient to keep people who engage in this kind of thing protected for decades. And that's one example where we did literal. That is on there. That's not speculation. That's
Yeah.
like, we talked about this
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, I mean, what was Alexander Acosta? I believe was the name of the
Attorney General.
Yeah, the deputy attorney general at the time, who was told not to touch this guy because he belonged to intelligence.
Yes, exactly. And
And
so
also,
then
there were a number of cases that where it was pretty close to catching him, and all of a sudden something mysterious happened, and yeah, you have to wonder why.
right. So I mean that there, it's quite obvious that happened. We don't know in this case, but it's like, um, uh, I just can't take the bait on getting all, like this is going to be dangled in front of people to get them all upset. And I have no idea to what extent his activities, like when you do stuff like that, if Cat Williams is talking about it on a podcast and just like casually drops it, then that means it's known enough. So who did he piss off in that web of who knows what that he was interacting with?
Yeah, good question.
And I don't like the public's outrage being manipulated to that end, or I'm wary of the possibility that there's something else. Like somebody pulled. All right, they pulled the trap door on Diddy and they're getting rid of him. But we don't know what's behind that.
I'd agree with that.
And we've seen
Certainly.
federal agencies act in unscrupulous ways before.
Sure.
So, why should we believe this is any different? And who was he catering to? Right? Aside from all these allegations, if he was trafficking, who was he trafficking?
Yeah. Who was he trafficking to? And there's a lot of scuttlebutt out there. Not many hard facts. I mean, it seems like every time we get together, we end up one of us brings up his name, Jason Whitlock. I mean, he made lots of allusions this week to Diddy's father being, an asset, and even Kanye, which I also have this as well, making a similar comment. It is Kanye, so you got to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, but then put a grain of salt to that grain of salt too, right?
Mhm.
Because sometimes he's not as crazy as he sounds, right? You got to do a grain of salt, but then be skeptical of your skepticism at the same time.
My daughter in public.
Yeah, for sure. This is Kanye West on Drink Champs.
Kidnapped my daughter in public, and I didn't have the address of my child. None of these niggas that want to say something
Travis gave you the address, though, right?
Travis gave me the address. Right. But as far as Meek Mills, Puff Daddy, whoever, none of these niggas, all you fake hard niggas, fuck you. Hold on. Okay. All you fake hard niggas, fuck you. Right. You know what I'm saying? I don't give a fuck because you can't shoot nobody anyway. And the reason why you got talks is because you did a deal, you fucking fed. You know what I'm saying? That's why you got to come at me, because part of the deal for you to be a daughter and get out of jail is that you promise that you're going to go pull my coat card. So y'all niggas shut the fuck up about me. Now let me say it calm. You niggas shut the fuck up about Michael.
Right.
Michael Jackson, is that what he was getting at?
I think he's always compared himself to Michael Jackson.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
Keep dreaming, buddy. But okay.
Yeah, but he's not the only one who's made the illusions. A lot of people made the illusions that at some point there was some sort of deal struck with Puff Daddy or Diddy or Sean Combs.
Deal from who striking a
Because,
deal? The
well, if
intelligence?
you go back to it, at least with, I think the assumption is government deal. He was. We can't know for certain.
Implicated in
Clearly,
Tupac's sort of,
and
right?
yeah, and Tupac, and also the Shine situation as well, where Shine has been in jail. I believe he's got for life, I believe, and Puff Daddy. I mean, he was there, and he definitely shot that person. He didn't get any jail time. And the question is like, how does he keep escaping grasp of the law? And I think a lot of it, and also he's sort of found himself repeatedly in this sort of, vote or die is one example where he's just keeps to get in more and more powerful spaces, accumulating more and more. And maybe he's just an amazing businessman. Maybe there's a lot of allegations, a lot of illusions out there from people in his industry, his own industry, that something's been smelly with this guy for quite some time. Now, I'm not going to say that any of this is a fact because I don't think we know for certain.
No, we don't. We just know this is speculation, but open speculation.
Yeah.
It's worth commenting
You don't
on.
hear that about everybody. You don't hear that about Jay-Z. You don't hear about most of his contemporaries. You don't hear that about.
No, but I remember you and I discussed the Cosby case maybe whenever that was, 8
Yeah.
years ago, whatever it was,
A while ago, yeah.
or maybe even longer. And that was also spoken about openly in comedy circles and in entertainment circles
Sure.
for a long time. And I remember you saying at the time was like, well, how do we know?
Yeah.
Right. And when you have this like cascade of charges all of a
Mhm.
sudden like blossoming at once, if he made a deal with the government, it's like, well, for whatever reason, it's not expedient for them to keep him protected anymore. And so now they're going to really pile it on, is what I'm wondering, and make this guy seem like the worst person on earth when, I mean, I don't know. I can't get all riled up about things like this. There's been people protected by the government. I mean, our government, this is a fact, by the way. Our government employed prominent Nazi scientists in the space program. People
Oh,
who
yeah.
did like really, I'm talking upper level horrible shit.
Yeah. Warner von Braun. Yeah.
Yeah, one of them, I don't remember his name. It was in Wendy Painting's dissertation. I mean, the guy was doing pressure experiments on concentration camp captives to see how much pressure in space, like depressurization, humans could take before their bodies exploded. I mean, that's
disturbing.
That's extremely disturbing. That's a level of depravity that is beyond the pale. And yet, that dude was given like a fucking new name and witness protection. So like, don't expect me to get all like, oh my God, when they decide, when the state decides to make an example of someone or prosecute someone.
Well, yeah. I mean, I mentioned Warner von Braun because like the Simon Wiesenthal setter openly said that, hey, this guy should have been tried for war crimes.
Right.
And he ended up running NASA and helping us get a man on the moon, which I do believe happened.
Okay.
But
good for the record.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't. Maybe not a lot of people, but a fair amount of people don't. But yeah, like, look, it would not be all that shocking if at some point we found through some foil a little bit down the road for somebody else's dissertation or in some book that is looked down on, that we find out that there was some infiltration of the hip hop world of the 80s and 90s as it reached its apex. I mean, we saw. I mean, there's at least one very interesting book that claims that it happened in Laurel Canyon in the 1960s.
Right.
We know that there has been a lot of interest in our government and culture and subcultures, let alone the powerful people. You know, like you mentioned, we with the whole Epstein element, and it would not shock me. Would not shock me.
Well, and just, almost to bring this full circle, so the Merry Pranksters, which was Ken Kesey and that whole gang of like LSD taking, figures who were associated with Haight Asbury and the psychedelic rock movement and the Grateful Dead. I mean, we know that the feds infiltrated those communities, but also Ken Kesey and them were products of the MK Ultra experiments, which, I don't want to get too down that rabbit hole, but this is all congressional record. Like, you can go to the, look up these documents online that are, heavily redacted, but this is not quote unquote conspiracy rumble. This is like based on actual congressional hearings. Just the idea that the government was doing those kinds of experiments on often unsuspecting college students and mental patients is horrifying in the extreme. So whenever you have some fucking media know-it-all dipshit who is either knowingly or being a useful idiot to propaganda, being like, "Oh, conspiracy theory," it's like, well, I mean, how do you explain MK Ultra? In what sane world does anybody do? And it went on for decades. I thought it was short, but it actually went on for decades. And to have a government that does that kind of shit, all of a sudden cough up P. Diddy, or even just on a more sort of, I guess, down to earth scale, the shit that the Reagan administration sponsored in Central America, all those rape and death torture squads in Nicaragua and El Salvador, and it's like, oh, but Diddy's the worst person on earth, and fucking what's his name, Weinstein, Harvey Weinstein is the worst person, and we're supposed to get all, oh my god, it just feels so manipulative. What I was going to say when I said bring this full circle is I got one of the last interviews with David Crosby before he died. I interviewed him a month before he died, and he was talking about climate change. like he was big on it, And I'm not saying, but it's just interesting. He was in that Laurel Canyon posse.
I'd like to close with Candace Owens, if you don't mind.
Well, very pleasant topic to me. Yes.
All right.
I've come completely around on Candace.
Let's talk big and broad. Tell people what happened. What shall I?
Please.
Candace Owens signed with the Daily Wire a couple of years ago. Daily Wire is a massive conservative media outlet. It was founded by Ben Shapiro. He doesn't run it anymore, despite what people believe. But it was founded by him and Jeremy Boring, and it's become a Goliath. It's included people like Jordan Peterson now, Candace Owens. They have a bunch of homegrown stars like what's her name? The Comments List girl. What's her name? Brett Cooper, Matt Walsh. What is a Woman? And so they produce a ton of content. Fascinating company. fascinating, doing interesting things. They bring in Candace Owens. And Candace had friction with them from the jump. This got amped up with the whole Gaza attack on Israel back on October 7th. There was a lot of sniping, a lot of back and forth. And we hit a crescendo not long ago. So I'd like to show some of Candace's last appearance on Daily Wire, in Daily Wire World. This is 90 seconds.
Because what it registers to me as is power. Real power hiding behind a veneer of victimhood, the kind of power that can take somebody out and end their entire career if that person says something that they don't like. And in this case, it's not that I'm saying things that they don't like, it's that I'm refusing to allow my voice to be controlled. I want to be clear to you guys. I'm going to be honest with you because everybody's noticing it. Every single political commentator in America, every single one of them knows this, that if you do not step out and say things that are radically pro-Israel, or if you are too quiet on certain narratives and they want you to be radically pro-Israel, you can lose everything. That's truth. That is a fact. I'm not feeling like I need to hide from that anymore because, or be afraid to say it, rather, is a better way to say it, because I've endured this for years. I'm just at the end of my rope. I have given so much rope here and I am just done with it. Every person that you are a fan of, they know this. Every person that you line up to go hear speak, they know this. Again, it's not even on the basis of what you say. It can sometimes be on the basis of what you don't say. That an entire mob will assemble, they'll write piece after piece after piece until you subjugate. If you don't subjugate, the bounty grows larger. So yes, there was a large bounty on my head for the crime of refusing to suddenly hate Muslims and to condone Muslims getting bombed following October 7th. Everybody can see that. I have said, because what it registers to me as.
Before we go forward, do you think she's truthful, she's accurate? What are your thoughts on what she said?
I mean, I don't know I really value Candace Owens, but that's because I can turn the dial down on her. In other words, when I hear her talk, I filter it and I know she turns the dial up with pretty much anything she says, right? You have to kind of bring it back to a frequency where it's not as bombastic. I don't know. I mean, I guess to some degree we maybe should presume that she was experiencing this friction within the Daily Wire power structure, but then is also playing it up to her fans to kind of be Pat McAfee of the conservative sphere. And look, rock bands have done this forever. Oh, the label doesn't want us. The man doesn't want us to say, blah, blah, blah. They're keeping us down. I mean, I don't know to what degree she's like wearing that, you know?
I came to a very similar conclusion. I do think that she's ramping it up. I mean, let's look at her next move. You know, that sort of says it.
And I mean, maybe she smells an opportunity like, oh, now that it is heretical to say anything against Israel in conservative circles, here's my opportunity to create this big dust cloud where I will get people to follow me who feel alienated.
Welcome to my locals page. So much to talk about. Obviously, I'm going to take a couple of weeks here just to rebuild and to refocus and to create something that is actually mine and something that can't be threatened or taken because it belongs to me. I can't tell you enough how much your support has meant to me over the years. We're just getting started. Join the locals page. Obviously here you can support me and my work as an independent journalist, as an independent podcaster. We're still going to be doing 5 days a week. There'll be tons of announcements coming in the next couple of weeks. And I guess the last thing I want to say is thank you. And for those of you that don't want to be on locals and just.
So she clearly, to your point, perhaps she is seeing a lane here, an opportunity here, and a niche within a niche inside of conservative media, where it's like, hey, I feel like within one of the, as Steven Crowder called it last year in a different kerfuffle, big C conservative media, that that there certain things are permitted and certain things are not permitted.
Sure.
And maybe she found one of them, in at least within that institution. I don't know that you could find that everywhere. I know Tammy Lauren found that with the Blaze. That was a kerfuffle a couple years ago. Tammy Lauren is not anti-abortion. She's I guess pro-choice is the phrase. So yet at the Blaze, Glenn Beck lost his mind and
Sure.
and basically, I wouldn't say fired her, because the way the Blaze works, it's not exactly a fire, it's a contractual thing.
Mhm.
It's kind of a partnership kind of deal. So
Right.
and then she of course lands at Fox. And the question was, did she do it? Did she? By the way, from what I've seen of her at Fox, she has not gone back there since.
To the abortion issue.
Not at all. So did she do it because she smelled an opportunity to level up and go to Fox? Or in this case, maybe with Candace, level up and go on her own? Or because these are, or is it because it's a big flashpoint for them? Maybe it's a combination of both.
I wonder
on it being both.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what's funny is, even though I think Candace Owens turns the dial up, she doesn't strike me as particularly insincere, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
I think she sort of brightens the saturation on what she's presenting, but I don't think she's speaking out against Israel just to be just to capitalize. I think she has look a lot of people who are drawn to becoming these voices do so because they have a lot of oppositional energy in them to rail against where they feel their perspectives are being constrained. And so it's only inevitable that some of them are going to feel that within the conservative media ecosystem. Once they're no longer just railing against quote unquote the left, they're going to hit those walls. And as we can see, the conservative sphere has its own version of wokeness anyway.
Sure.
So you can become a heretic within that. And I think she was probably feeling legit frustration. I mean, this is somebody who said "fuck Ukraine." Didn't she say something like that? Or I don't care about, I don't give a damn about
Something
Ukraine.
like that.
Yeah, it was so. I think that no matter how much of a performance we see from her, I think it stems from her actual instincts as a person to respond to being controlled in what she can think and say, and she doesn't like that.
I also think it's because they were a bad match to begin with.
Why do you say that?
I believe that Candace Owens has seen herself as a conservative Oprah-like figure, a conservative Megyn Kelly,
Okay.
a larger figure. She looks at a person like Ben Shapiro as a peer.
Okay, right. Not as her boss.
Not as her boss. Yeah. I think there's a reason why when we see this with a lot of these digital deals that are going down, there's a reason why Bomani Jones is not at the Ringer. There's a reason why Bomani Jones is not at freaking Meadowlark. And it's because their perception of themselves in the marketplace, rightly or wrongly, is that they are on the same level as them. There's a reason why Stephen A. Smith's not going to cut a deal with the Ringer. Stephen A. Smith will say, "Hey, I'm as big as Bill Simmons, and I can build my own."
Yeah, I would say Bomani's definitely wrong, but
yeah,
whatever. That's not your point. Yeah,
my point is, I think Candace Owens sees herself on the same level as Ben Shapiro.
Sure,
and
unlike her ceiling probably sees herself as higher.
Yes, and unlike Jordan Peterson, who I think his primary motivation is different. I think it's money with Peterson. It's money, and he does have these belief system that he wants to get out. He has his perspective he wants to share, but it's that money. I don't think Peterson. I think Peterson likes being famous, but he doesn't like it as much as Candace Owens does. I think fame in the stature of Candace Owens as a figure is Candace Owens's primary motivation. And I think that's hard to do under somebody else's umbrella.
Sure. So she was always going to get too big for them.
No, I don't think she was. That's the thing. I think it's a false self-perception. I think she could easily stand in a world next to Matt Walsh and Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro. I think she thinks she's that. And as long as she thinks she's that, it's not going to work in that world. It's going to she'll have to be within a Fox News world, something larger. She'll have to cut a deal like Megyn Kelly did with Sirius XM.
Okay.
So it would, in order for her to work in that kind of circumstance. So I think that's why it didn't work. And I before we move on, I'd like to show you one last bit because I thought this was very telling. This is Ben Shapiro. He appeared on Piers Morgan's show. And this was very interesting.
One of the consequences of this war has been a lot of very high passions on both sides, a lot of angry disagreements. You and your company have been at the center of a very high profile one at the moment with Candace Owens, who's now left Daily Wire. Was she fired or did she leave of her own volition?
I'm not going to speak to this topic, Piers.
At all?
At all.
You can't give me any insight into why she departed?
No hints, no nothing. I'm not going to speak to this.
Can I ask why?
I mean, you can ask.
No, I'm not. You can ask why you don't want to say anything.
Again, you can ask.
That's a great question, by the way. It didn't work, but it's a great question.
A staunch defender of free speech you are.
Before we go for it, what was it a great question?
Because, I mean, some people would fall for it. Some people would. Ben Shapiro was very good at remaining tight-lipped, but a lot of times when people say they're not going to talk about something, they do want to say something or they're sort of bubbling over, and you can try to get at it another way. But he clearly doesn't want to say anything. But it's worth a shot, you know? Well, can I ask you why you won't say anything? And then you'll get, then they'll start getting going and they'll say too much.
I think this continues to get interesting.
And it would surprise me if it had been someone's opinions that would make you want to part company with them. However contentious.
I mean, suffice it to say, the only thing I will say is what I've said all along with regard to Candace or with regard to any of our other hosts. I am not in hiring and firing position with the Daily Wire. I'm a co-founder of the Daily Wire. I'm a co-owner of the Daily Wire. I'm not actually in management. Jeremy Boring and Caleb Robinson are in management positions with regard to Candace or anyone else. And as far as the free speech situation, what I will say is that no company has the obligation to literally pay anyone. The Daily Wire is a publisher. It is not a platform. I've never called for Candace or anyone else for that matter to be banned from YouTube, to be banned from X, to be banned from any platform. That's a different story obviously, when it comes to any publisher gets to make decisions about what it wishes to purvey and not.
I mean, I'm just not going to labor this, but one more point I would make is it's been reported extensively that the reason for her departure was because her comments have been perceived by people at the Daily Wire as anti-Semitic.
Again, I'm not going to comment on this, Piers.
I find this interesting for a couple reasons.
Well, he basically admitted it.
What he did. Yes. Your point that Pierce asked a perfect question did lead to him basically making a non-admission admission.
Yep.
That hey, we don't have to have people on that we disagree with.
Yep. Totally.
It's true, but it also I think is really bad branding.
I was just gonna say it undermines their brand.
You think it undermines their brand?
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm agreeing with you. As you were saying that, I was like, it's true. You can do that. But when you position yourself, as the Daily Wire has, as the voice of, especially over the last decade, where conservatives have been afforded all this latitude to posture as the free speech wing of American politics, which we know they haven't been that, but they've convinced themselves, I think, that they are, in large part. When that's your fucking brand, oh, we're saying all the things that are not allowed to be said, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, actually, we've got this thing we don't want our host to say. No, I think Shapiro did exactly what Piers Morgan was hoping and expecting he would, that he would let something surface, even though he's like, no, I'm not talking about it. First he's like, oh, I'll pass the buck. This is not my decision, but we don't have an obligation to platform people we don't agree with. Boom. That tells you everything. Fucking goal, put Piers on the scorecard for a goal. I thought that was great.
It makes me wonder if this kind of media is maturing into, maybe maturing is not the right word, but moving into another phase where they no longer care about that kind of branding, where they feel that we speak to something else, something larger, something where we're sort of not living up to those principles, like free speech, like having civil disagreement, that kind of thing. All the intellectual dark web stuff that Ben Shapiro used to espouse, back on the Rogan show and with the Weinstein brothers and all that jazz.
No, he's like, no, fuck it. Now we got our Juggalo camp and we can kick you out if we want.
Yeah. And I wonder, is that the Daily Wire changing? It is a much bigger company than it was back then. Or is that just the media landscape changing? And I can make arguments for both.
Yeah, and I would say I don't know. I mean,
the argument. Go ahead.
No, please.
My argument for the media landscape changing is it goes back to the very beginning of this conversation, as I talked about how things have gotten tighter, how the acceptance of outside opinions inside of media outlets has gotten tighter, and that it's just like we're not even going to have we're not even going to consider having some other opinion outside of our own in our world, because yes, it is a world that we own, in a world that a Juggalo camp that we can command.
Right.
So
and initially all initially any Juggalo camp is, hey, come here where you're welcome because you're outside of, you're a misfit everywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But once the camp gets going and you get enough people, now you can be deemed a misfit and get the fuck out of here.
Without a doubt. Like they're no longer in the growth phase. Maybe they believe that that they have their core. They can get bigger, but they have their core. And because of the nature of the marketplace in terms of media, where Joe Rogan can be massive, averaging somewhere around 10 to 20 million listeners and be the number one show basically in America. I could definitely, if you take out sports, pretty much number one in America. That, Shapiro himself gets a few million a day, and that's just Shapiro. They have, I know, in terms of subscribers, the last number I remember off the top of my head was somewhere around 2 million. Not a ton, but that's not counting all of the podcast subscribers, which are many, 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 many more. And the podcast subscribers you talk about, Matt Walsh, of all these cats, Jordan Peterson, all of them. Maybe they're thinking, hey, we are at a saturation point because of the way media is, where it's infinite and incredibly narrow. There's not much more of these other people, these outside voices that we feel comfortable with or that will come into our Juggalo camp. It's about sustaining our Juggalo camp and building around our Juggalo camp, making our camp bigger and more comfortable for our people and their kids and their families and nobody else. That's
and
one scenario.
making the boundaries around it much more clear and shiny and bright. And this is where the fence is, and we know we're not venturing outside that sheep's pen because we're safe here with each other. I would never have expected Ben Shapiro to be a good faith or capable of good faith entertainer of divergent viewpoints, or even capable. He's not cognitively capable. I think he's just, especially on Israel, like I've never found his arguments to be in good faith on anything or even worthwhile on anything. He's complete 100% bluster, snowflake also. And so that guy's not going to have much dissent within his own ranks, whereas if I were designing a news media entity or a media entity, I want friction and I want there's certain things I don't find palatable too. I think we're all, but I also have an attraction to certain things that I find unappetizing too. So it's like it would be built in. Shapiro's not going to do that, but especially not with Israel. So it doesn't surprise me at all. I think this is more of, yes, I think there's a bigger picture issue that you're right to identify, but I also think a company with his stamp on it, even if he claims he's not doing the hiring and the firing, is going to have a particular narrowness that maybe we shouldn't necessarily diagnose everything else, but there are other people like this who have their pet aversions that no, I want to stick my head in the sand. I don't want to hear anything else on that. And we're all to some degree in charge of our own fiefdoms now, even if they're small. And when they're bigger, you can make these sort of calculations. I kind of feel like they should have made the calculation, well, hey, it's good for business if we keep her on. Right? Like let the content, let them argue all fucking day long. Like it's good. It's going to attract people. But maybe they're thinking people would have lost trust in what they wanted from the Daily Wire.
Well, that fits into my other possibility, and I think it's likely a combination of these two things. But this is my other guess here. The Daily Wire is giant, but it's not Fox News. It's not the New York Times. It's not ESPN. It's not MSNBC. They can't survive the loss of Ben Shapiro. I think that the people online are right to look at him and like, we've been hearing him talk this certain way as a certain figure for a long time, and they can't. And if it came down to it, would the Daily Wire pick Candace Owens or Ben Shapiro? They're picking Ben Shapiro. He's much bigger as a figure. His content gets more attention. All that.
He defines their brand more too at its heart, I think.
Without a doubt. So if you're Fox News, you can survive the loss of Tucker Carlson, the loss of Megyn Kelly, the loss of Bill O'Reilly, and countless others. If you're NBC, you can lose Matt Lauer, you can lose Katie Couric. Obviously, different reasons, different situations, different time periods, but you could survive the loss of those. Brian Williams is another one. You could survive. That was a controversy, giant one back in the day. If you're MSNBC, you can survive the loss of Keith Olbermann when he was your number one guy, and you can move on, and your audience stays with you. That's not so in the digital world. When you establish a very large audience, it's attached to a person.
Yep.
And
a personality.
And a personality.
Right. And yeah, not to cut you off, because actually the person can also lose that audience by drifting from what they initially served. It doesn't even have to be somebody else choosing between one or the other.
A certain amount of audience capture is required.
Right.
So it's quite possible that, hey, whether it's through soft power or actual power, Ben Shapiro is like, hey, I don't want to be here in a place with a person like that. And my contract's coming up at some certain point, a little bit down the line. He doesn't have to say a damn word more than that. Or his people, his representatives don't have to. Also, there's the element of from what I was reading online, Candace's contract is coming up relatively soon anyway. She's going to want a lot of money. Would you give a lot of money to someone who isn't jiving with the kind of world you want to create on your platform?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if the friction doesn't sell, I guess no.
I think it's quite possible that yes, this is it, that a bit of both scenarios I laid out happened here, where hey, her contract's coming up, all this stuff is coming up with the friction between these Daily Wire figures, and they decide to pull the trigger and move on. And it's them thinking, hey, like we can't afford to go stray too far from the brand that we built around Ben Shapiro, and we can allocate those 5, 6, 7, whatever many millions of dollars she's going to want to some other project, or to build another Matt Walsh, or build another Brett Cooper, or these other people, and do it on the cheap instead of paying through the nose for someone like Candace.
Yeah, to homegrown talent, to develop talent on their own turf instead of.
And that also speaks to something that we've talked about in other conversations, where you asked about, like, we talked about sort of some of my experiences in newsrooms and et cetera. When you home grow talent, that talent usually stays within the parameters that you taught them. So homegrown talent will adhere to the orthodoxy that they believe in.
Yep. Yeah, and even if they don't believe it, they know where their bread is buttered.
Yes. And they'd be a lot less likely to go on their own.
Mm-hmm. To rock the
And
boat and cause a situation where they and most of that homegrown talent, the company would have the leverage because it's like, well, we made you, unless the person gets so big.
Mhm.
But even, we talk about Stephen A all the time. Even he is not going to have nearly as much leverage as I think he wants to, even though he's their
Yeah.
biggest.
Yeah, that was another thing. I don't think we're going to get to it today, but that's another thing that he is like, look, he is the dutiful, and I think this is partly why I think Disney will give him his money. He is the dutiful servant to that corporation.
Totally. You know what's funny is Ethan Strauss pointed out, I forgot who he was talking to. Was it Ryan? And I always forget his name. You
Rosillo?
know who I'm talking about? No.
Brown?
Glass-Steagall. Glass-Steagall.
Got me go. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he was talking to him. He said that Glass-Steagall, I think it was Glass-Steagall who said it's actually they always tout Stephen A as like the biggest. But Pardon the Interruption actually does more numbers. Is what they said. So
Yeah, it does. I mean, on a given, on average, for sure. And on a day-to-day basis, like part of its day part, you talk about late afternoon. You talk about 5:30 versus 10 a.m. It's like your limit is going to be different.
They mentioned that too. Yes.
But yeah, Pardon the Interruption usually beats him. But here's the thing about Pardon the Interruption. Those guys are in their 60s, going on. I think maybe Wilbon's in his 50s still, but Mr. Tony is quickly approaching 70 versus something like Stephen A, who's what, 50 something. Like he's got a long.
He's older than I am, but yeah,
he's got a longer runway. So keeping him in house, it's for me, it's more like the Shannon Sharp scenario when you have a younger guy that's coming, that's shown you something. Keeping him under contract is smart.
Yeah, even though Stephen A is the Sean King of college basketball.
Yes, because they don't actually care about sports.
No, but the fact that he never actually, he never actually played and all that brouhaha over his, lying about his college basketball career, which really wasn't. I wonder, I think if I'm just using my hunches, and I don't know nearly as much about how this all works as much as you looked into it. I'm sensing that is going to be a rocky negotiation, and that because Stephen A will overinflate his value to the company, and I don't think he's gonna. I don't think things are going to end well between him and them. Well, if somebody named E.M. Case is on the case, that's all we need. Yes, Diddy did it.
Yes, I agree. Puff has been sus.
Speaking of that, I was going to mention, you talked about Laurel Canyon, and you talked about a government infiltrating rap music. I mean, we didn't even mention Gary Webb and Ricky Freeway Ricky Ross, and going back to Whitlock. I love how Whitlock sounds like somebody's like grandparent, like saying rap music is like the scourge. But I mean, I noticed a long time ago. I'm talking about in the 90s. I remember when DMX was on the cover of Rolling Stone. And I just remember having this feeling, and this is nothing against DMX, but I was like, why are these magazines, would they put like a black physicist or um, even Wynton Marsalis on their cover? Somebody who presents differently than that. I'm not saying anything against DMX, but like, why is this so manicured and tailored to one specific kind of voice in rap that the mainstream media loves putting out there? And this gets into that whole the secret meeting that shook,
Yeah,
that whole
that didn't
letter
happen.
thing. But I mean, is it that far fetched to at least consider whether this wasn't engineered to some degree to feed into the prison system? And at that time there was a profit in privatization of prisons, if I'm not mistaken. You can correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, still those are public institutions, sure.
And there is something gross about it. And it's funny because I looked up articles on Gary Webb in the Village Voice, and I found one that was like both trying to paint him out to be like this deadbeat dad, but also defend his reporting at the same time. And that's pretty, like, if what he says and what the real Ricky Ross, not the fucking fat, champagne, rapper guy.
Yeah.
But if what they say is even remotely true, I mean, that shit is yucky. It's like real gross, like dealing crack. The allegation is dealing crack to make money to fund the Contras in Central America. It's like, so we're supposed to be upset about Diddy. I don't know. And if Diddy is in bed with those people who are willing to go to those lengths, right? Like, then why wouldn't they cut him loose at some point? Now I sound like I'm on Patrick
Fair
Bet
enough.
David show. It's like all this unsubstantiated speculation, right? But
Uh,
like the whole Gary Webb thing, it should, you're not going to see that documentary, or maybe there is one, but I don't think you're going to see that documentary on Netflix anytime soon.
all right. Look, I think there needs to be a Patrick Bet David special. By the way, I've done some digging and I found some very interesting, like pretty sus. I mean, the guy basically runs a multi-level marketing company.
I think I've seen the same exact video you're talking about, where there's this like British YouTuber that exposes. Yes, I know.
And he's been interviewed directly about it and asked about it directly, and he danced. I can't believe he did the interview, but he did, and he danced and danced and danced and danced, and it looks pretty bad.
He's pretty
By the way,
oily.
I'm throwing away that value tainment money. I'm throwing it away. Like the value tainment money, I have just pissing it away left and right.
What do you mean?
Oh yeah, because we'd be signed a value tainment. I'd be on,
Oh yeah. No. I mean, I grudgingly like his podcast. I've gone back and forth on it. I initially liked it, then I was initially like, it's, it's basically, it should be called trashy-tainment.
Yeah, agreed.
Because as like trash junk food, it's like pork rinds or like deep fried chicken poppers or something. It's like Popeye's chicken. It's like deep fried. It's like fatty and salty and gross, but it's tasty, right? But as trying to posture as somebody who like breaks down ideas and brings anything useful to conversations. The show
Mm-mm.
almost does that in spite of him.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think he's grifter.
A friend of mine described him as like the kid in class who always tries to sound like he knows, like he's smart and knows what the teacher says, tries to say what the teacher wants to seem more on top of the subject, than he really is. Like, he totally strikes me as that. The one thing I do like about his interviewing style, though, that I've noticed that I'll give him a ton of credit for, he does speak to people, everybody, in this very sort of even, respectful way. No matter what you say on there that is like fucking crazy. Now, he's trying to get you to say something for clicks, of course, but he has a way of like conveying respect to the interview subject that I really like. And the next time I get an opportunity to like do one of these workshops, I'll use one of his clips as an example. I do really like that, for whatever that's worth.
I find no value at all. I don't enjoy it at all.
No value-tainment.
Yeah, no value in valuetainment. It's not like it's not for me.
It's very
It's just terrible.
It's
It's
very
terrible.
predictable. You're like valuetainment is like the dollar menu of podcasts. You get that like little chicken sandwich. You get that little chicken sandwich from all the
New Yorkers. I think you're a disgrace
What
to
is
all
that?
Americans and New Yorkers. I think you're a disgrace to all Americans and New Yorkers.
Who is that?
That's a clip. I think if I remember correctly, that was a clip that I found from a news interview. It was like a man on the street interview about Rudy Giuliani.
Okay.
And it was,
don't apologize. You're a scoundrel.
My bad. Wrong one.
I think you're a disgrace to all Americans and New Yorkers.
That one.
Don't apologize. You're a scoundrel.
That's Phil Hoffman.
Okay. Well, on that note, we will try to be more than the dollar menu of
I hope we provide more than a dollar menu here.
the dollar menu. But yeah, I mean, I would recommend people check out the Gary Webb book, Dark Alliance, and form your own. I mean, I wonder whether Freeway Ricky wasn't pulling our fucking leg too about all that shit, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, on the other side of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting. He'd be worth analyzing.
And why, if it's like, here's the thing that I always found suspicious about him. If he's talking about all this nefarious, shady, deep state, what then would have been referred to as deep state, but like government, conspiratorial behavior, why does he have a fucking podcast? Like it's so weird.
Maybe or Freeway Ricky.
No, Ricky had a podcast for a while.
Because you can't stop someone from a podcast.
Yeah, but it's maybe the effect of those things being out there in the culture more is strangely to numb people.
Maybe I don't think it's. I think you're overthinking it.
I don't know, man. Some of the people he was rolling with, he claims to have rolled with, are pretty.
Yeah, but we're talking long ago. Most of these people aren't around anymore. Like the people who were, that were involved in that trade are no longer involved with that trade, and most are no longer breathing, nor are the people who were around them.
Okay.
Usually, that's why you can be, once you go away to jail for a while, you can come out and start over because the people you had beef with are no longer. around.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that works. I don't know how long the intelligence community would hold you to whatever.
Oh,
But
you're
I'm
talking
just
about the
saying,
intelligence community.
yeah, I'm just saying, yes, I'm just saying, like we
I don't
should
think they
take what
care.
he says.
I don't think they care.
Okay. I'm just saying we should take what Freeway Ricky says with a grain of salt too.
Okay.
And what
All
Gary
right.
Webb said, and what the government, like all of it. It's like we don't know. It's kind of like what we were saying about the climate change conversation. Like if each spoke is like a circus tent and they're all saying wild, outlandish things, maybe the truth is somewhere less outlandish. You know what I'm saying? That's all. It's like how do you even know how to
I
make
got
sense of all this stuff? So, but on that note, I should
all right.
want to go listen to one of his podcasts.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us.
Of course,
We
man. Thank you for having me as always.
all right, be well.
Yeah, you too.